Okay, guys, we're getting some comments, and it looks like a lot of people are eager to start. Thanks, Percy from Miami and Shaw. We're also eager to start, so let's get started now. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webcast. Sorry, I'm just having some technical difficulties as I share my screen here. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me okay. Can you guys type into the questions box and let me know if you can hear me? Okay, great. I'm going to just introduce myself here. I'm Jana Fung. I'm the product marketer here at AdStage. And on today's call, we have Sangram and Nikki from the Terminus marketing team. And we have Michael and Bryson here from the AdStage marketing team. Just so to let you guys all know what AdStage is we're an all-in-one advertising platform. We support full campaign creation for full campaign creation and reporting for both your search and social ad campaigns. So we support Google AdWords, Bing ads, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn ads as well. AdStage is one of the only self-service solutions that supports all 5 of these networks. And today we're partnering with Terminus on the webcast, How Digital Marketing Can Drive Revenue for B2B Marketers. So for Terminus, for those of you who don't know, is a B2B account-based advertising automation platform. So what that means is Terminus will proactively put your messaging in front of people from your target company list anywhere they go online, whether that's across social, mobile, display, or video. So before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of household items. We are recording today's session, so if you guys have to drop off for any reason, we will be sending the recording out at by the end of the week for you guys to reference back to it. We're also going to be saving some time at the end for questions. So if you do have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them into the questions box, and we'll get to them at the end. And also, if you think of any more later down the road, we will get to those. So if you are a social media user, not sure why that's showing up here, but if you are a social media user, we'd love for you to take any insights that you drive from today's webcast and tweet using the hashtag #FlipMyFunnel. We'll explain a little bit more about what this hashtag means in the presentation later on, but in the meantime, feel free to follow us on Twitter at AdStage and at Terminus. So let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. Today we have Mike and Sangram, who will be giving the presentation. Michael is a director of demand generation at AdStage. He has over 7 years of experience with PPC advertising. And prior to AdStage, he led a Google AdWords Premier agency. And he's also generated sales pipelines as an in-house B2B marketer. So he can be found on Twitter at LonoHead. That's his handle. And then Sangram, who joins us today from the Terminus team, is the co-founder and chief marketing officer of Terminus. And prior to Terminus, he headed up marketing at Pardot, which was later acquired by Salesforce. So you can follow him on Twitter at Sangram Madre. So today, our presentation, we're going to take a look at B2B marketing a little bit differently. And we're going to challenge a little bit about how you think marketing should be done in your own organization and how you can improve this to drive even more revenue. So we'll look at what is causing your digital marketing efforts to fail. We'll talk about what's wrong with your current process in terms of measuring lead volume and moving leads down the traditional funnel. Then we'll go into the ugly truth about B2B marketing, realizing that not all leads are going to become opportunities and how we conquer that. So we'll explain some strategies that you as a marketer can do to increase revenue and increase it faster. So this will cover how you need to start thinking about marketing going forward to tackle some of these challenges that we discussed early on. So just a heads up, we are going to be covering some completely new concepts in today's webinar, and we're going to give real examples of why some of your existing strategies aren't working and may never work. So we're also going to provide you new innovative strategies, and we'll explore a completely different way to think about B2B marketing from a revenue standpoint. And of course, at the end, we're going to save some time for live Q&A with the experts. So let's get started. Take it away, Sangram.
All right, thanks, Jenna, and really happy to be on this webinar. So let me start by saying this: everything that we know about B2B marketing is like sucks, right? Big time. I feel like, personally, just having run marketing at Pardot and then getting acquired by Salesforce and just being around with marketing, I feel like B2B marketing pretty much sucks, right? I mean, the reality is we have this awesome funnel, which I always feel like should be in an infomercial of like getting skinny fast, because every time I look at this funnel, I get like a really pain in my stomach. Like, what is going on? We have lots and lots of people at the top. We're trying to generate leads from anywhere possible. And then what do? We look at them and say, all right, which one of these are, kind of, good prospects? Well, that means we spend all this money to get any and everybody. And now we want to spend more money to find the right people. So there's clearly something wrong there, right? And once we find out who the right person is or the right company is, we spend even more money to find out, well, are they ready to buy? And that's why this funnel is like super skinny and absolutely hated, right? And I think most marketers and salespeople hate it, but this is how traditional funnel has always been. This is how we all have looked at kind of B2B funnel. And the problem really starts with the fact that this was honestly a sales funnel, which was about different stages of the sales cycle. And we as marketers kind of adopted it and said, well, let's just take this funnel and use it so that we're on the same page and trying to do alignment. But the bottom line, the alignment is out of the window. What we're really doing is kind of trying to adapt to a sales funnel and calling it the marketing funnel. So hopefully, as Jenna mentioned, we're going to talk about some really interesting ways to kind of look at it completely differently, and hopefully it will be something that that you guys will be able to take home and kind of implement in your company.
Thank you, Sangram.
Yep.
Thank you. And as you were speaking about that, the traditional funnel, a lot of the marketing is actually spent at the very top when it comes to your budget, when it comes to your focus. And so let's talk now about kind of the challenges of this model. So when you're looking at the model at B and the kind of the status quo today, it's really not optimized for B2B marketing. And the reason being, Sangram, you kind of highlighted that it was following kind of sales process. It's better really attuned for a B2C model where the stages are well known, you have quick cycles, and the progression seems very linear. But when you start looking at it from the B2B perspective, it's actually quite inefficient. Just to emphasize this kind of disconnect, Forrester was reporting that only 0.75% of leads turn into closed revenue. So that's less than 1%, just to kind of emphasize that. If you think about that, that's a huge kind of time suck and budget suck. And where we're investing our resources and what we're getting out of it, it's just highly, highly inefficient. So we're hoping in this webinar today is to kind of challenge your thinking, make you think in a different light, where you can focus your efforts to best kind of generate revenue and double down on what's working. So on that note of not being fully optimized for B2B marketing with that funnel, there's also the disconnect that marketers, and myself included, have too much focus on leads opposed to accounts. And I think that's really where you see a lot of the sales disconnect. So marketers often talk about leads, lead generation, lead statuses, where your sales rep is really talking about contacts and accounts. And so that's where you see a big drop off and disconnect. And one of things that I've personally had pains with and experiences in the past is I might come at the end of the quarter and I'm looking at my overall goals, and I think I absolutely killed it. So I have a low CPL, so I decreased my CPL by something like 15%. I've increased the total amount of leads. But then when I go back to my sales team, it really didn't move the needle in effect to the revenue that was produced, or even they tell me like the quality of leads were just not on par and they're not getting the demos that they wanted to. So in their light, marketing's failing. In my light, I think that I'm doing very well. And then you see a lot of that disconnect. And then there's also kind of the notion that when someone comes to you, like your VP of sales or CEO, and they're saying, okay, we need to double our revenue the next 2 quarters, there's the notion in your head as on the marketing side, especially my role as a demand gen guy, my first inclination is, okay, well, I need to go in, I need to double the amount of leads I'm generating. And a lot of times it just simply doesn't scale. You don't have that necessary budget, and you just don't have the time invested as well. And a lot of that is inefficient. So instead of that, we're going to provide a couple new strategies that we'll unveil in a couple slides here. But also, so we were talking about, the lead volume play is weighted more than precise targeting. So a lot of the times you'll find that it's very easy. You'll look at your conversion rates, and you'll think that, okay, this and then the very last one is talking about the linear path of the customer journey. This is where I'm going to kind of hand it over to Sangram. But when we're looking at the funnel, it looks like very linear, very logical steps in that progression. And that's just not quite the case when it comes to B2B customer journey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, I think, let's take an example here very quickly, right? We all are like mobile, social kind of, people in general, and there's nobody who wakes up in the morning and says, all right, I'm going to have a cup of coffee and start my awareness of a product, and then go have lunch, and then kind of go into a consideration phase and have dinner, and by that time I'll purchase. Nobody wakes up and follows that routine. Everybody could be jumping around, and it's just maybe a problem that hits your desk at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, oh my goodness, we've got to solve this problem. And you go online and Google or any other place, or we ask a peer, like, hey, how do you solve this problem? So we are all in this constant kind of trying to address it, and making sure that we're in front of the people who are actually trying to address a problem is way more important today and way more cost effective, especially with the digital marketing strategy that we're about to talk about, than any other strategy that we could be doing. Because putting an ad or putting a message in front of people who don't really have that problem, that's where wastage occurs. And that's why the linear path of like broad-based marketing and broad-based advertising kind of fails on its head. So I'm super excited and pumped to talk about some of those strategies and kind of new way of thinking of that.
So let's unveil your model here, Sangram. I think this is what you're most famous for here.
All right. I don't know about famous, but I'm definitely very, very excited about it. All right. So this is what Jenna was mentioning about like flip my funnel. This is really what it kind of comes it all together. So let everybody kind of take a second to kind of look at it. But the whole idea started, I was so frustrated looking at that, the original or traditional funnel, that I literally kind of scratched it off and turned the piece of paper that I was drawing this on upside down. And I was like, well, what if, if this funnel is what we want, if funnel is what gravitates everybody and pulls everybody together, well, let it be a funnel, but let it be a funnel that actually makes sense to me. So it starts with kind of account. So let's take an example. I'm a big fan of just taking examples. Let's say you're a financial services company and you are targeting, any of the financial services companies that are in the Fortune 500. Guess what? This may be a shocker to someone, but for the most part, you're going to be able to find that out in a matter of minutes, because it's almost like yellow pages, right? There are only probably 50 or 60 financial services companies in Fortune 500. There is no secret to it. There is no mass marketing. That's why B2B is kind of cool, because we all know who we are targeting at the very least from a company perspective. So finding a list of companies is awesome. So carrying on to that example, let's say you identify these 70 financial services companies that are Fortune 500. Next step, at least in my view, is that, all right, let's say you're selling to IT people in those companies. So you really need to expand your reach within these 70 companies to all the IT people over there, right? I mean, that's really what the expand feature is all about. It's not about putting a message in front of everybody in the financial services company. It's about putting message in front of the people who actually care about your message. That's the expand stage. The third one, which is really the first step in the traditional funnel, which is putting the message out. So now, let's say you're figuring out the 70 companies and let's say 10,000 IT people in the 70 companies that you want to get your message in front of. Now you can put the right content in front of them through the right channels that make sense to them. So it might mean that you're going to create an ebook or a webinar, or use all the same tactics, but now you're so focused on these financial services companies and the people that you're going to see a much higher open rate, a click-through rate, or attendance rate, and every single kind of metric that you're working on, because everything that you're doing is so tailored, it's so custom. You're talking to people where the real pains are, as opposed to any and everybody that would sign up for an ebook. And then finally, that my personal favorite is kind of advocacy, right? I mean, in B2B, we all know Nobody wakes up in the morning and kind of goes and buys a product. We all are big fans of Trust Radius or G2 Crowd, or picking up the phone and calling a friend in the similar industry and saying, hey, how did you solve this problem? And they will recommend a couple of products. So recommendation is a big part. If you are really focused on these 70 financial services companies that your target is, and if one of them becomes your customer, and if you're all doing all the right things, then we can use that one person to help you kind of talk and get engaged with other companies in that 70 companies that you are targeting, and really turn your advocacy program into a lead gen program. That's really the model. That's really the flip my funnel concept, and it really starts with the account and kind of keeps going on from there, as opposed to any and everybody out there. Does that make sense, Mike?
It does, and I love this model that you put in front of us. And account-based marketing is not new, but I would say there's been kind of a lightning rod as of recently, and kind of the talks around that. And I think a lot of that has to do with having more visibility now with CRMs and marketing automation systems. That's kind of showing that marketer how inefficient their previous lead gen efforts have been, and kind of focusing on top of funnel. But I'd love to hear from you, Sangram, what kind of strategies that you've implemented and seen work very well when it comes to account-based marketing. Sangram?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. There you are. So,
right,
of course, when I ask you to actually, put the proof in the pudding and tell us the real strategies to implement, you go silent on us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was just talking to myself on my side on mute. But I'm back. So one of the things I really love, and we can talk about each one of these strategies, one by one. But I love the fact and we do it on our side, is when we know exactly which companies we're targeting. We're targeting everyone who has a Salesforce CRM and uses some sort of marketing automation. That's kind of our sweet spot, right? And I'll take ourselves as an example. And what we do is we do targeted kind of advertising and marketing only to those companies. We're not worried about lead gen programs. We're not worried about, how many kind of leads or downloads we got. All we're worried about is, here are the, X number of companies that are out there that are in our sweet spot. We're going to target, we cannot target on all of them at the same time. So we're going to target on, like, let's say 200 companies this month, and we're going to just do any and everything possible to kind of make sure that these 200 companies know who we are and what we do. So we do advertising, we do event marketing, we do webinars. We just really start focusing on just those 200 companies, and we're starting to see more engagement from those companies because we're speaking their language and are able to close more opportunities.
So let's start with the biggest one, events. We know that, as far as the B2B marketer's budget, it makes up to about 20 to 23% of your overall spend. It's one of the biggest outlays of cash, and a lot of times there's a lot of nervousness, especially from the C-level suite, on what they're going to get as a return there. So do you mind speaking a little bit more about kind of what's the, generating a buzz around that?
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about events. Every marketer knows how to do events. If they don't, they don't have a job, right? I mean, event is one thing that every marketer needs to do. Either they're going to events and attending, or they're actually hosting their own events. It's a big deal. It's a big ticket item, as you mentioned, and it is a lot of visibility from everybody in the company. So you got to do a good job. What happens mostly, Mike, I feel like, and I've seen it happen many times, I'm sure you have too, is that we work so hard day and night to put a really good show at the event. And as soon as the event is over, we hand over those leads and give it to our sales team, or put them in a nurturing bucket so we can just send an email over email for the next 6 weeks and then get on with our lives. And we completely miss out on the opportunity of focusing on the really engaged kind of folks who actually took the time to stop by the booth. So a strategy or an idea, so the traditional way of looking at just the leads is kind of, is something that I feel like we're losing or leaving money on the table. So let's go to the next slide where we can look at how we look at the buzz from an events perspective. So let's imagine, Mary West is one person who stopped by the booth, right? And she's from financial services company that, just to carry over that example. And she is from the technology department, right? So that Mary Beth, she's from the tech team and she's from one of the financial services companies that is from the 70 companies that you wanted to target to begin with. So she kind of aligns. So all the other people who stop by, who are not part of the financial services group, are all right to kind of put on nurture. But the people who are from financial services from these 70 companies, if they stop by the booth, they're gold, right, for you. So now what you could do with digital advertising, and this is where it really becomes cool with all the tech that we have available, you can now say, all right, Mary is unique. She's the right person. We need to make sure that we are focused on this company for the next 36 to 90 days, right? However long your sales cycle is. So as you hand over that lead to your sales team to go ahead and follow up, imagine you can put your message in front of that entire tech company, technology folks in that financial services company, anywhere they go on Facebook or display ad if they go to CNN.com, or if and it's all proactive, right? Without any of them coming to your website, you're able to put message in front of them anywhere they go. So for the next 60 to 90 days, while the salesperson is trying to build a relation with Mary and explain what the product is, Mary's team is already seeing your company anywhere they go. And that's the idea of kind of doing account-based marketing at scale, because you're really changing the game. You're really hyper-focusing on the right company, and you're now getting alignment between sales and marketing to drive better results.
And I love the proactive approach there, because a lot of the times when you're not planning for it, events become more of a game of chance. It depends where your booth location is. It depends if you're getting traffic or not, or even just what your swag giveaways are. But a lot of times those leads aren't qualified. I love your approach of thinking, hey, let's get in front of the target accounts before the event, generate that buzz, and then have them visit us in the booth and find us out. So I think that's a fantastic approach.
Oh man, I can't tell you how many times I have like a sales leader, many of the organizations I've worked with before will say, man, those leads were great, but they all were looking for a free iPad, right? So, whatever you're giving away, what they're looking for, then they're not good. So figuring out who they belong to and going back to that ABM model we just kind of looked at, by narrowing down that, all right, is this person fitting the exact criteria we need so that we can focus all our energy in it, is absolutely critical.
And so I just wanted to highlight one thing there. You talked about, you kind of dabbled into more of the advertising approach, and being an ad guy, I have to kind of reveal some of the strategies I've used that I think have worked quite well. So in addition to, your email marketing and communication, you talked about retargeting visitors, and I think that's the right approach, especially when you start looking at segmenting by geo. You segment by how the recency they've been on your site. In addition to that, taking those emails and directing them to a landing page where they can fill out a form for an appointment or just to become a VIP. Retargeting those kind of pools have worked very well in the past for me. And then in addition to that, I just love the evolution now in advertising custom audiences. So before, email was way ahead of us when it looked at kind of segmenting your database, putting things in drip campaigns for marketing automation, and advertising is finally kind of catching up with that. So with custom audiences, I can take a slice of my database, or I could go to my sales rep and ask for the target account, and then specifically target that group, whether on LinkedIn by company and job title, or whether on Facebook and Twitter by their actual email or handles. It's just a wonderful kind of approach where it's much more pinpointed than the past.
Absolutely. All right. So let's look at the next strategy. So when I think about dead accounts, right? First of all, more and more companies, more and more marketers are figuring this out of the art and science of lead gen, right? Do blog every day, write enough ebooks, do webinars, do virtual events, or kind of do partner programs, whatnot. But they could be doing. We all have become very good at figuring out how to generate leads. So the trap we're going to, marketers, especially marketers who are actually generating a ton of leads, are getting into is that when they look at it 3 months from now or 6 months from now and go back and say, wait a minute, how many leads do we have? And somebody said, well, we got 50,000 leads. Well, if we have 50,000 leads, why do we only have like 10 customers every month, right? Why don't we have 20, 30? What do we do? All right. And a smart marketer would say, let's just send them another email. That's where it kind of falls down, because they're already getting enough emails from your company, so they're not going to respond to another email. If you look at a deeper problem there, It maybe that person is no longer with the company that you essentially generate and call the lead, right? So that 50,000 may not really be 50,000. Moreover, even if that person is with that company, maybe that person is no longer the champion, right? May not be the person responsible for that job. So the marketer's job is evolving so much every day. Maybe they're working on different priority projects and things. So how do we find a new champion in that company? So when people get leads, we almost feel like we got the entire account, and we don't. We almost have like one or two persons. And there are famous stats all over the place that says there are typically 5, 6, if not 10 people in the decision-making process. So making sure all of them are engaged and seeing the message is super critical. So what I believe could be super interesting is not only revive the one person and try to figure out how we can get in front of them through email, but through all the digital advertising that Mike just mentioned, we can revive the entire account and potentially find a new champion in that account. And that's really where you can bring the account to life, right? And that is a big part of what marketers can do. Wouldn't it be cool to find the next person in the line who's going to be excited about what problem that you're solving, as opposed to sending the same email or different emails to the same person?
And that's a fantastic concept that you bring up, because a lot of the times there's, as you mentioned, there's a huge database that you have, but when you're looking at bringing in a new business, a lot of times our heads immediately go to new lead generation. So I love the concept of going to your graveyard, taking out select contacts and accounts, and seeing what you can kind of work out of those. It's going to be a lot more cost efficient that way.
Absolutely. I think Mike, the bottom line everywhere that we're talking about is really how much waste is, right? It's easy to send another email. It's easy to send another. We're just not used to putting enough effort, right? Even though we all are working hard, it comes down to the point that we're not putting enough effort into every campaign that we run. And if you take a step back and look at it and say, is this the right thing to do? Chances are we'll probably say, no, let's think differently.
And that's kind of a perfect segue looking into, a lead nurture as well. I think when you start talking about kind of the demand generation space, a lot of people think it's just synonymous with that initial lead generation. And it's not. It's supposed to increase your awareness of the company and interest in the company. And so a lot of times, myself included in the past, as a demand gen guy, I might generate some new leads, and then that's a clean handoff. They filled out their form or they requested their demo, and then I go away, I start focusing on net new leads. And that's been, I think, aiding to that inefficiency model that you were talking about, where when you start looking at what's more efficient is to take those leads that you've generated and nurture them through the process. Any lead that's nurtured by marketing has a higher likelihood to be closed by a sales rep, and it's typically for a higher revenue ticket. So from being an advertising guy, I think I've learned a lot from the age of marketing automation, where you've seen people put members into campaigns and you see them produce really good content based on their lead status or how they're interacting with sales. And you can do this exact same now with advertising, which is a really compelling way. Now that advertising is better closely aligned with their CRM, based on either actions they've taken on your website, interactions that they've had with sales, you can look at your database and then go after those and put them in different messaging funnels for advertising. So an example of that would be someone fills out a form, you can retarget them with a white paper, and then the next step might be a webinar, and then the next step might actually be a demo. So you don't always have to beat them over the head right away to get that hard sale. You can actually start to nurture them now using advertising, which is kind of a new concept. And I know it's something that you guys have been pioneering over there as well.
Oh yeah, and I think the way you put it was like super awesome. Like I think I could have put it in a better way. And I think that the only thing I would add to that is the fact that I think most marketers, especially in B2B, are thinking about this one-to-one, one-one marketing. And I don't mean like personalized, because we honestly are not, right? That's how B2C does it, and it's awesome. We're not one-to-one. Like one-to-one meaning one lead, one channel. And that's the problem. One lead, one email as the only channel of communication. And when was the last time we kind of woke up in the morning and said, all right, let me go through all of my emails, right? I'm excited. It was like probably 1995, right? And last time I heard, I wake up every morning deleting all my emails so that I can get to the only emails that I care about and kind of interested in. So the whole 1-1 ratio needs to stop. and maybe we need to engage with people on their terms. So when we think about nurturing, email and marketing automation is awesome, and we kind of ruined it because we do too much of it. So instead of just doing that, what we could do is do it at the account level instead of just one person. Go back to the same philosophy of identifying all the people in that company that would actually care about it. Maybe one of them is a champion and will engage, and then do it to all the other channels that matter on their terms. Because if you're at a soccer game on a Saturday morning, you're not going to fill out a form, or you're going to keep scrolling through a bunch of content anywhere you go, right? I mean, everybody's on the phone all day long, right? So the idea is like, how can you engage people in a non-interrupted way and in a way that matters to them and kind of engages them on their terms. So I love the idea of kind of nurturing throughout the sales process.
And that leads perfectly into, aligning what we're doing on marketing with what's going on in sales. When you look at sales, it's a grind at times. Only about 2% of the, everyone they reach out to actually turns into a booked appointment. And so that's quite the grind. And there's things that we can do on the marketing end to increase those numbers and make it easier. As you kind of mentioned, that it's not always at times a one-to-one message. A lot of times when you're looking at an account or a company, there's multiple decision makers. Serious Decision said something like 200, anywhere at the company size of 200 to 300 employees, there's up to 7 decision makers in any kind of major technology purchase decision. So there's a lot of players, more than just that initial champion that the sales rep talks to. They then have to go up the chain and start talking to the director level and possibly even the C-suite. So there's some things that we can do on our end to provide some air cover for the sales team. So of course, things like on the marketing automation side, have our catering emails either coming from the marketer or even better from the sales rep, and kind of, constantly educating and better kind of qualifying that prospect. But in addition to that, from the advertising side, there's a lot of things that we can do. So I think one of the first things is sitting down with sales, really understanding a couple of things. So their wish list of accounts, what are the ones that they, the Fortune 500 that they really want to go after, they've had trouble penetrating? What are their top prospect accounts? Which are the ones, they're starting to make that decision and they need a little emphasis when some of the influencers are starting to make that pitch to their superiors. And just sync that all with their database. So, a great way to kind of attack that is when they're going throughout the stage, especially when it's that champion and the internal companies bringing it to that director of marketing or that CMO, that you make sure that you're targeting that director of marketing and CMO with messaging through advertising that's relevant to them, and help enforcing more of like the hardline metrics. So things like case studies, actually putting together some pieces as to what your product does. So, when they hear about your solution, it's not the first time. That sales rep doesn't have to go into a full cycle pitch again. They have some awareness of your company, and that helps kind of, accelerate that sales process.
Yeah, absolutely right, man. I think about like this one as an example. Like somebody mentioned to me, and I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Focus. Even I haven't seen, but somebody mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago, which is where it's a Will Smith movie, and in this movie, he wanted somebody to bet on a jockey with a 55 number, and so to get to bet him on a 55 number, it was hard. I was like, why should I bet on 55? I'm like, wait a minute. He bought like 7 T-shirts with 55 number on it, or a ball cap with a 55 number, and placed strategically everywhere in that arena. So everywhere this person would look, he would see the 55 number. And all of a sudden, he started thinking, man, I should be betting on the number 55, right? And that's really what we're talking about. It's about creating an halo effect in the organization that you want to get your foot in the door. And sales has been trying to do that for years, but they only were limited to phone and email. Now, with B2B advertising and proactive advertising, personalized advertising, targeted advertising, we're able to do this 55 kind of thing, right? We are able to get your message in front of CEO, the executive team, the entire decision-making team, the entire team at a fraction of cost than a billboard ad, and make sure that everybody kind of at least have some brand affinity with you in B2B. And then when the salesperson or marketer or anybody who's talking to that company about your brand, you're like, oh, I've seen you guys. I think I know what you guys. So you've at least crossed the first hump of who the heck are you, right? And that's really what proactive or air cover can do for sales teams.
One of my favorite ones, and I found really cost effective, And so you start talking to your sales reps about their key target accounts. And one of the lighter ones, so you talked about, most people don't want to click on a bunch of things or open a bunch of emails and just sit there after the kids' soccer game on a Sunday and they're scrolling through their Facebook feed. Video engagement campaigns are one of my absolute favorites. So for things like 5 cents a video view, I can put it in front of that targeted exec. They can see a quick 15 to 30-second video. They get informed about the product. It's more in kind of a playful way, and it doesn't seem it's kind of salesy and advertising. And it puts kind of a nice impression in their mind of the company. And that's kind of one of my favorite strategies to loosen things up. So oftentimes I'd have the sales reps come to me and say, hey, Mike, I've talked to them enough. They want to hear from me anymore. They want any more emails. I'll put it in something like a video engagement campaign that actually has opened up further discussion.
Absolutely, man. I mean, most people probably won't be filling a form, like an 8-field form on they're waiting at a soccer game, but they will watch a video. So that's an excellent example, Mike. That's really cool.
So we kind of talked about, let's say we go through the process. We've helped our sales team out. They finally invite us to the coveted, happy hour at the end of that Friday because we closed that account. But I'd love to know, Sangram, you guys do a good job of kind of preaching to the choir on growing those accounts across the organization. I just love to kind of pick your brain on some of the strategies that you've seen work well, either at Pardot or even what you're using now at Terminus.
Oh, no. I mean, that's a great. I mean, one, we don't have multiple products, so kind of, growing into that is kind of a hard thing for us because it's just, we don't have an upsell. But we have a ton of customers, and now I'll just share a name of like SalesLoft. I think a lot of companies are familiar with them, so they're a customer of ours. And what they do is super interesting. So they have 2 products, Prospector and Cadence. So what they do is everyone who's a Prospector customer, they just want a deeper, and everyone in that company that's already using Prospector, they want to make sure that they all know about Cadence. In the old days, the only way they had was the sales guy calling up and saying, hey, do you want to buy or upgrade? And they were like, heck no, we don't want to spend more money, right? But now what they do is every single customer, as soon as they sign for Prospector, they're able to also see the Cadence ad anywhere and everywhere they go. So like the sales manager, the VP of sales, the sales, the associate or the BDR or SDR, whatever the titles may be in the sales team, they all are like, hey, this thing looks cool. So they check it out on their own time. And now again, creating that halo effect in that company, there's an inbound inquiry coming to them from their customers that use Prospector. Hey, we would like to demo Cadence. Without spending a bazillion amount of money and having a ton of cold calls and asking for an upsell, they are actually able to get inbound for upselling their own product to their own customers, which is for us as like phenomenal. That's like super smart. So I love SalesLoft. I always like to give them a try.
That's an awesome approach. And SalesLoft, I mean, those guys have taken off. I remember seeing them like a year or 2 ago where they are today, and the size of the organization has like quadrupled. That's an amazing example.
Yep. Everybody should check out SalesLoft. Like, it's nothing to do with our product, but they're just an amazing product, amazing company. So pretty cool.
So I think that kind of brings us to the end, but I wanted to ask you, Sangram, so people who are a little bit new to account-based marketing, where I started with lead gen, I was so obsessed with the top of the funnel. It took me quite a while to change my mindset. And so for those who are just kind of dabbling into it or even thinking about it, are there some key takeaways of like how to approach it initially?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all goes back to like, what do you want to do in the organization that you work in? Do you want to be a sales support? Do you want to be a lead gen kind of still kind of goes into sales support, or do you want to be a revenue gen marketer, right? I mean, if you really truly want to be a revenue generating marketer, and it's not just use it as a buzzword, but truly mean it, then you got to be looking at pipeline and revenue numbers. Those are the only 2 metrics that should actually matter to you. And if that's really true, and if pipeline really matters to you, then you will automatically stop thinking about leads and start thinking about engagement. We'll start thinking about acceleration. We'll start thinking about how do we make sure that our sales are able to close more deals faster, right? And all of those things would drive. And advertising is one thing, right? And it's awesome that we're able to now do all these things at scale. But there are still these old school ways of amazing ways to do it, which is doing a direct mail for the right kind of companies and people that are in the process, or doing an event, local event. They are still working really, really well. Advertising is just an easy and cheap way to be super targeted and focused. So I guess my only advice to that is we got to define ourselves. Are we truly a revenue generating marketer? Do you want your organization to be led by marketers versus sales? And if you want to lead, then the only way to think about it is account, because last I've seen or heard, nobody closed the lead. Everybody closes account. So if you want to be on that ship, you need to kind of start thinking about accounts.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Sangram, for all of that information. That was really great and a cool concept to take in. I'm pretty new to this, so this is really interesting stuff to me. But now we're going to actually open it up. Yeah, awesome. We're actually going to open it up for questions now. We have a few that are coming in, so I'm just going to go through them. But give me a second while I look through the questions that are coming in. Okay, cool. I think this first one might be for you, Sangram, and also Mike. It's about advertising. So maybe you guys can both give your perspective. The first one is, can ads be targeted proactively without someone coming to your website first? Sangram, why don't you start first?
Sure. Yep. I think retargeting has, I'm looking for a closer word out there, but retargeting has really kind of burned a lot of bridges, right? Because, the funniest thing is, like, when I bought a Nike shoe and I went to the Nike kind of online before I bought the shoe, it still is showing me the same ad, buy Nike shoe. I'm like, how many shoes am I going to buy? Right? So retargeting has been really bad because it's not smart, right? It really keeps following people everywhere they go. Really happen in the sales process. So I think proactive advertising is super interesting, which is exactly what the question I believe is, which is, hey, look, I have these 70 financial services companies. I know who they are. I know exactly that I want to target tech people or marketing people in that company. Can I put an ad proactively in front of them? You absolutely can. 3 years, 4 years ago, you couldn't, that wasn't possible. Now it is, because there are tons of ad tech platforms that have come up, like Facebook has become smart, so has Twitter, so has LinkedIn and others. And at the same time, there are tons of data providers like LinkedIn, NetProspect, Dun & Bradstreet, and obviously Terminus does that and help that to kind of bridge that part. But because of all the data partnerships and tech partnerships that are happening, ad tech partners are happening at the same time, you can proactively put a message in front of a person that you care about, even if that person has never come to your website to begin with.
Sangram, I think you nailed it. When you're talking about, looking at who your target accounts will be, really creating that ideal customer profile. But when it comes to proactive targeting, I think LinkedIn really has it nailed. If you know what your job title is that you're going after, or if you know what your company name that you're going after, they have that targeting really dialed down. In addition to things like Facebook, where if they like particular topics, or in Twitter as well, if they have certain interests or they're actively talking about a conversation around a particular topic, that's a great way to introduce your solution or product. And then, of course, there's YouTube as well. So, based on what they're actually viewing or searching for, you can introduce it that way. So from a proactive nature, B2B, LinkedIn's a great place to kind of look at and start. In addition to that, the social channels, if there's a particular kind of interest that they have, or if they're already in your database but maybe haven't visited your website just yet. And then if it's just more around, a particular topic, that's where YouTube really comes into play.
Yep, you're right.
Awesome. So our next question comes from Nancy, and she actually missed what I think there was a slight disruptive transmission with the way people could hear. So she wanted just to get a recap on how you actually get in front of the right people to help your sales team build that relationship. Mike, can you give those examples, and then Sangram comment after?
So getting from the right kind of people often comes down to your database. So Sangram, his model is really look at your target account, look what you have in your database, and really utilize that to your advantage. And I completely agree with him there. So as far as getting in front of your right kind of target base, first look to what your sales are doing and look at your database. So who are those contacts that they're currently speaking to? You can put those in things like a custom audience in Facebook. So if they're registered on Facebook with that email, same thing with Twitter with tailored audience, you can go after them directly. If it's more on you want to influence the decision makers within that company, take that company name, so you can export a piece of your database, a segment of it. Then you can look at the company names and you can pop that targeting into something like LinkedIn or Facebook as well, and then go after VP titles or director of marketing titles and help kind of influence and introduce your solution to them. So that's where I would start, is look at what sales is doing, check your database. When you have those prospects, either market to them directly or take their company names, plug that into targeting, and go after those additional decision makers within that company.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Mike. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I'm sorry you missed some of that, and happy to kind of chat. Like Mike and I both are pretty active on Twitter. Feel free to kind of chat, and we'll follow up. But the idea really starts with, who are you targeting? And it is absolutely possible. I know it sounds crazy. I was like year ago, I thought it was crazy, and I thought it was creepy, to be honest. But the reality is, if somebody can serve me an ad to solve a problem that I care about, I'm absolutely okay from that advertising, that as a consumer myself. So that's exactly what today's our AdTech technology is allowing all of us to do, is that, advertising is cool. The reason it's bad is because, I still get cupcake ads, but I'm not going to buy a cupcake, right? Don't send me that ad, right? So when I see those ads, I get mad. But if I see an ad is about something that I care about, that is a problem and it's getting solved, then I'm going to click on it. I'm going to engage with it, and that's what today's AdTech advertising platforms can do.
Great. So we have a couple more questions. The next question comes from Neil, and he's asking if Terminus has buyer intent targeting, or if there's any other networks that you guys know of that offers that. Sangram, do you want to go ahead and answer that for the Terminus side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we absolutely do. The way we kind of do it, and I don't want to go into product pitch because I know that's not the intent, but since it's so focused, and it's really, most companies, as I said, like, exactly who they're targeting. So finding a list of companies to target, either we can help, or companies already have that information in their own Salesforce or CRM database. What we do is kind of automate that whole process of getting your message in front of them across all the digital channels that are out there, and be able to show you account level analytics that shows you exactly how many people from this company engaged with your brand, so you can have full-on understanding of, like, are these companies really engaging with you? And that's super powerful. And then I wish this was available like 5 years ago when I had a problem somewhere else, but today it's absolutely possible for you to know exactly which companies are engaging with your brand. So your sales, your marketing, your product, your executive team, everybody can get behind the notion of, like, let's go together close this account.
Cool. And I think this is the last question. So maybe you guys can talk about both of your experiences here, but Mary is asking, what is the most common use case for account-based marketing? I know we kind of touched that it's B2B, but is there a specific use case that you guys want to touch on, or an experience that you guys found where this would have come in handy in the past? Mike, why don't you start?
Yeah. I think where I found it most helpful is when you're targeting that Fortune 500, that enterprise. So for the enterprise team, it was often very hard for them to not only get a hold of someone on the enterprise side, but there was often a very long decision-making cycle, often going through multiple layers. Then they'd have to get multiple people on the phone. And so it was a very long, arduous process. So by introducing advertising into that cycle from an ad perspective, but also from a content perspective and an email perspective, account-based marketing, that's really a home run for me. So that's where I've seen it work the absolute best, is for that enterprise team when they're struggling to get into that account, to really help them get additional contacts from that company, to warm up some of both those influencers and decision makers, and shorten that overall sales cycle.
Yep, that's a great point. I'll answer it as well. Maybe in a form of question that I got a few years ago from someone saying, hey, if you were to get another 20% more budget, where would you put it? And that question still kind of sometimes perplexes me and kind of makes me think a lot. But now that I'm being in this space a little bit, I feel like every funny penny that I can put in from a marketing perspective, I'll put in the pipeline acceleration phase, because those people or those companies, they're going to buy product, right? Because they clearly have identified a problem. We have identified that they have this problem. We know what their overall intent is and who the decision makers are, and we also know that they're going to figure out and buy, and they're probably talking to their competitors at this very moment. So why wouldn't I, as a marketer, help kind of close those deals, right? Because even a 2% increase or 3% increase in your deal kind of velocity or the size is going to, for a lot of companies, could quadruple their revenue numbers, right? So the goal, if I have to kind of answer it in a different way, is I would put every penny that I got into pipeline acceleration, which is what I love, the sales air cover strategy, which is, anything that reaches an opportunity stage, you kind of automatically start advertising to not only that one person, but more importantly, all the decision makers in that company, and create that halo effect until the entire sales cycle is complete, so that you as a company have an edge over every other company that is only communicating with that person over email or phone. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sangram and Mike. That was really informative, and this is truly breaking stuff for B2B marketers. I just want to remind everyone that we will be sending a recording out at by the end of the week. So make sure to take a look for that. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We hope that you take some of these strategies today and start thinking about how you guys might want to run marketing in your own organization to drive more revenue rather than leads. Any other things to note, Mike, before we drop off here?
I would just say after this, Sangram really gets me set anytime I talk about account-based marketing. But really just go in there, identify who your ideal customer profile is, take a look at your database for opportunities there, and just start experimenting. But as Sangram said, make sure that what the messaging you're giving is relevant and beneficial.
Great. Well, thanks again, guys. Really appreciate all the insights, Mike and Sangram. Have a great day, everyone. We're going to end the call 5 minutes early, but appreciate you guys all joining today. Have a good one. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye.